is the approval of the agenda with the change to move the school spotlight, Galena Elementary School, to letter number D. The administration is recommending approval to do this and approve the agenda as amended. Do we have a motion to approve?
I make that motion.
Ms. McGee has the motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a second by Ms. Dorsey. Any further comments or questions? Okay, hearing none, we'll go ahead and call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The motion passes as presented. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. Ms. Messick?
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Okay, we will then now move into the academic achievement map data discussion.
Okay, at this time I will turn it over to Gina Jakubowicz, who is our Director of Teaching and Learning.
Good evening, President Getz, Dr. Couch, members of the board.
Good evening.
This evening, we'd like to share with you the results of our beginning of the year measures of academic progress, also known as MAP data. We will be comparing it to past performance and reviewing the goals that we have set for this school year. As you know, the vision and mission drive the work that we work on day in and day out as a school system. The vision is that all students will graduate equipped to achieve their highest potential. The mission focusing on the academic excellence through collaborative, equitable, and rigorous learning community. In 2019, a new Ready to Read Act was passed, and this part of the law requires us to provide screening for all kindergarten students, as well as any other students identified in first and second and third grade who may be at risk for reading difficulties. It includes a provision of supplemental reading instruction for identified students, progress monitoring, as well as annual reporting. The major shift that this act has had on all school systems is one that really drove the entire Maryland Leads grant, providing additional funding and support and intensive professional development in the area of foundational reading skills. This slide shows the performance of our students in the fall of 2022 compared to the fall of 2023. We are looking at kindergarten data and the performance of what we call foundational skills. These skills include a focus in phonological awareness, phonics, listening comprehension, as well as picture vocabulary. We are pleased to share that you will notice as you look across each of the various components of reading, that when you compare last fall to this fall, you will see an increase in every single area. This is essential because we know that foundational reading skills are necessary for students to be able to become proficient readers. They really must be confident and competent in being able not only to decode the words, but have those basic skills and understanding the letter sounds, word recognition, and so much more. All of this leads to what's called sentence reading fluency, which is another component of the assessment that's tested in first through third grade. That's where the rubber hits the road, that you move from that whole shift from decoding into becoming an automatic fluent reader. And the second slide shows the performance of our first and second graders that in the beginning of the year, the percent that are meeting or exceeding this sentence reading fluency data. This is essential information because it really drives the decision making at the school level. If a child is not proficient in the beginning of the year, they will then do an additional probe to see what areas are causing challenges and then tailor the individual instruction around that information. All of this leads to what we know as the grade 3 through 8 reading data, the measures of academic progress. This slide is one that you're very familiar with. It is a busy slide, and I apologize for that, but I'm going to try to unpack it in a way that makes sense. Believe it or not, I'm going to begin with the middle column, which is white on the chart. And the middle column is showing our baseline data from 2 years ago, spring of 2022. And it indicates the percent of students scoring proficiency of the top 2 levels, levels 4 and 5. That's the white column. If we go to the left, it shows the percent of students by grade level scoring at levels 3, 4, and 5. And again, level 3 are the students that you have heard us use the term on the cusp. So they are on their way to proficiency. We based our current goal of spring 2023 data. And one of the things that we are thinking about tonight is, have we set the target high enough? Or do we need to make any adjustments to the target for this school year? One thing that really stood out for Kent County compared to many other districts is we did not feel it was enough to set the goal equal to what the state is setting. They set a 2% increase expectation, 2 percentage points by the end of the school year, and we have doubled that. So we have asked that by the end of the school year, we strive, in order to meet our goal, to seek at least a 4% increase overall for all student performance in English language arts. Last year, going back to the center column for the district, we were at 30%, and we had the goal of moving to 34%, and we moved to 31% at the end of last year. Again, we doubled the state target. We did not meet that. However, if you see the little green checks, they are showing the grade levels. If you break it apart by grade, the target was not only met but exceeded in some cases for certain grade levels, depending on where they started with their baseline. Did they meet that 4% increase by the end of the year? The other thing that's important to consider here is we're looking at cohorts of students. So if we just focus on the first section for grade 3 going straight across, looking to the right where we see fall of 23, levels 4 and 5, it's green. 31% of our third graders are performing at a level 4 or 5 on the English language arts measures of academic progress. When we compare that to the start of last school, at the spring,
25% of the third graders were performing at that level.
One of the things
I just wanted to point out is you're not looking at the same students.
So
third graders, it's a different set of third graders when you look at the spring of this year compared to the spring of last year. But this is the first time we are able to sort of begin to follow students to see, do we see evidence of any of that summer slide from the spring to the fall? And should we do the same thing we did last year, which is keep that commitment to using the data from last spring rather than beginning with a lower score if that is what happened if we're seeing evidence of the summer slide. So let me walk through that for just a moment. If you look at grade level 4 and you see that in the spring of 2023, 33% of the students were scoring at levels 4 and 5. That cohort of students is now sitting in the fall in 5th grade. So you'll notice there's a 1 percentage point decrease. They went from 33%, that same cohort of students, to 32%. And again, it's just another way to kind of examine and analyze the data. Grade 5, 36% in the spring of 2023, and you'll see they decreased, so you'll see some of the summer slide evident there, to 32% in the fall. Our strategic plan has not only set projections from year to year, but we also have that 5-year, by 2025, the projection of over a 13 percentage point increase. So again, all of these numbers and all of this information is what we want to keep in mind as we think about whether or not we've set what we call a SMART goal, specific, realistic, attainable, time-bound. So when we look at that, have we done a good job with that? Do we want to make any adjustments? These are all the things that we want to consider.
Can I ask a question? If I'm reading this correctly, when you talk about, so for example, the third graders, well, any of those, anybody in the spring, is it, they're like the third graders are now fourth graders, the fourth graders are now fifth graders. If I'm reading that correctly, there was a decline in every grade.
Other than grade 3.
Yeah,
Right, correct.
okay.
Every grade had at least a couple percentage points where they slid back. We did see the same thing in the past. We didn't have as many grades evident year after year, but this year it seemed that every grade had a little dip in the fall, and that is not unusual. When we said that last year, as a board, you decided you wanted to keep the higher level spring as your target and
Yeah.
use that and then increase that by 2, rather than acknowledging and starting at a lower level. So you're right, yes.
Okay. Is there an explanation? And I know, as in anything, when you're dealing with a small number, and
Right.
we've got small numbers, 1 or 2 kids can really
Make a difference.
make a huge difference. But I don't want to accept that as the explanation.
No, I don't either, and I think one of the things that we've put a lot of time, energy, and effort is really thinking long-term with the emphasis on those foundational skills. So going back to the first 2 slides, our goal is to have that continue to carry on so that our third graders can bump way beyond that level of 31% proficiency to, exceeding what the state is achieving.
So I know, especially like in math skills, talking about foundational, if you can't add, you can't do anything else. Is there the trajectory's going this way, is there a time when we can anticipate that, do you catch up with your reading skills? Or once you're behind, are you always going to be, I don't know, that's why I'm asking you, or are you always going to be behind?
I think that's a great question. I don't think there's a single answer to that, but I do think it's important to keep in mind that we use multiple measures. So we're
Okay.
looking at one test score, and it would be, if a school team were looking at an individual student's assessment on MAP, and they scored below a level 3, they would then pull out a variety of other assessments, which may include things like a running record that's done one-on-one with the teacher, or looking at how they performed on the state assessment. So it's the multiple measures together that will help give the complete picture. There are times where individual students may not perform as well on one test, so you never want to put all your eggs in one basket.
Right, and I would just add that this is our formative assessments internal, so it's not, we can't compare ourselves with other school systems, it's just what we're using to measure so that we can set our goals and make some determination on what we have to do to adjust academically by grade level. So these are our formative tests, our tests that we are utilizing to set the bar, if you will, but these are not the state tests that we reviewed in the spring.
We have set a very high target. We're one of the few school systems that use MAP for strategic planning, and the goal that our board has set, that you have set, is really, you're looking at students that are performing in the 61st percentile on a nationally normed assessment, 61st percentile or higher. So they're not even in the 50th percentile. That's why we went, and we're looking both at levels 3, 4, and 5, and 4 and 5. We want to keep that rigorous target, but we also understand that not everyone's going to score in the 61st percentile, I can't say that fast enough, or above. Does that make sense?
A little bit. It's hard, so we're kind of comparing ourselves to ourselves as
Right.
opposed to having a statewide thing. But it makes it difficult, I think, to make the argument that, because, everything, not everything, but so many things are based on test scores, and that's one of the areas where we take a beating in the court of public opinion, that our test scores are, without being disrespectful, we all know that
They
our
need to
test
improve.
scores, yeah, well, that's a good way of putting it, that need to improve. But how can we say to somebody, I do know that we've moved up to number 18, from 23 or whatever, but we can't compare our apples to a school district's oranges. And how do we get around that? By being able to say, we are getting better.
I think one of the things that Dr. Couch and I are spending a lot of time on is our story and how it is that we can give the complete picture of the performance of not only our district, but our schools, comparing ourselves to other schools across the state. So I think in an upcoming board meeting, we would hope to share some of that, and that will give us a look at the correlation between our achievement data and our free and reduced meal data. Not for Kent County, but across the entire state of Maryland. And that's going to allow you to have a little bit more of an apple-to-apple comparison. And I think you'll see it in through a very different lens when we prepare it like that. Yes.
Okay.
Are there any students in this group that can't read at all?
Wow. I would imagine that grades 3 through 8, I'm sure we have some that are not what we would consider to be fluent readers.
Are they included in this?
Absolutely. And the other thing, Mr. Rhodes, is we have some students that have IEPs and have an accommodation on the state assessment. In other words, they may have what's called a human reader. So if someone has a disability and it's a reading disability, very few, but there may be some students that have a human reader on a state assessment. We, as a district, made the decision not to give that same assessment on our local assessment. So you're going to see the scores in some cases lower on this formative assessment than you would on the state assessment. And again, if in collaboration with our Director of Special Education, there's a very important reason for not giving those accommodations on this. We use this as baseline data, often showing us ways and specific needs that students have so we can better provide that support day in and day out in the classroom.
So those
it's a long answer to what you asked. But
Yeah, that's right. So those particular students that might not be able to read, they are included in this, or you
Yes.
take them out? So that will bring the scores
Correct.
way down.
Yes.
Because we have the lowest amount of students in the whole state. And I would think with the lowest amount of students, we should be able to do better, in my opinion. We have all this money coming in. And I know you're working hard. I've talked to you about this a couple times. I just want to keep pursuing. I want the grades to go up. And Dr. Couch, you can do this. We have to work harder.
So I think that's a good segue, and let's just kind of slice the data up a different way. This next slide will show you the same content area, English Language Arts, but now you're looking at it school by school. So you have our 3 elementary schools, looking at levels 3, 4, and 5. Center is your last year, 2 years ago, spring of 2022. And then our most recent data, I tend to always go over to the right-hand side looking at those top 2 because that's where we set our goals. Students scoring on or above proficiency level of 4 and 5. So again, our overall target last year was 30%, 32%. We did not meet it. Whew, can't remember those numbers off the top of my head, but we were at 30 in the spring. We doubled it. So the goal was 34, and we ended up with 31% overall as a district. But as Mr. Rhodes was saying, you know, when you look at it student by student, here's another view, school by school. Now, do we see some best practices happening within certain schools that can be replicated? That's one of the intent when we go visit from school to school with our learning walks. We're trying to see what we can learn from one another as well. So our principals are very well versed in this data. Our coaches are incredibly talented in using the information to really guide what's happening in the classrooms. And our teachers are really the people that know the most about this. So they're looking at it at the individual student level. And I think this tells a little bit different story. Again, looking down, you can see where we have successes and some challenges, and also just looking at how we did last year compared to the fall, you'll see no matter which school you're viewing, every school had a slide at the start of this year. You'll see that slide again.
Ms. Giacomo, it's just a question for you. So the spring 22 ELA 4 and 5 and the spring 23 ELA 4 and 5, those are actuals, correct?
Yes.
And so the spring 24, obviously in yellow is a projection. How did we track against 23 projection and 22? projections? Do we know that? Or can we get that information?
Help me understand the question a little bit more. When you say track, what do you mean by how do we
Yeah,
track
I
it?
mean, we're projecting a result in spring of '24, right? The ELA projection. 22 and 23 in the middle white columns is actual data, right? I'm curious as
Yes.
to what we projected for 22 and for 23 and how we tracked against that.
Yes, I mean, I'm thinking if I'm following you, that it's through our progress monitoring that we're doing the tracking. So the goal we set, doubling the state, and then how we track it is just by looking at the trends as we go throughout the year.
Yeah, like, for example, I'm looking at
I
district
think you're
total.
asking, how do we compare?
Yeah, how do we compare?
what we
So
set as
district
a
total,
target.
24 ELA, we're projecting 35%, which is a 4% increase, right?
Mm-hmm.
Our result for 23 was 31%. What did we project 23 to be? Was it 30?
It was projected at 34.
34.
Right, so we follow that. So we have that in writing as part of our strategic plan.
Okay. Yeah, I
So
was just
yes, we
curious
are
as to,
tracking.
you know, when where we
Right.
are versus what we're forecasting.
Right, and honestly, we're the only district using this, so some of the other districts have statisticians on board that help with that information. We did have consultation at the state level to get some guidance on it, and we wanted it to be double what the state had set. So we are tracking it, and we are moving in the right direction, but last year, 31 out, and the projected rate was 34.
So if I see this right, you project 35% for next year, but we could possibly be at 30%, according to what Mr. Getz just asked. You were at 34, then you went down to 31. So the
Overall as a
35,
district.
the 35 could feasibly drop down 3 or 4 points. Okay, just.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Okay.
I was curious what the comparison looked like.
No, I understand, I just don't want it to look so rosy, and then
Yeah.
it does, it
I
drops
know.
back.
Right.
And then we'll look at the data one, and I apologize, I know this is kind of lengthy, but the next slide does show it, because the other thing, when we talk about our mission with the equitable instruction, we want to be sure to pay attention to how all of our student groups are performing, which is what we're looking at here. And this may be a little more complex yet, but with this one, we took the starting data, and again, we looked at our projection and set even higher targets for our student groups. The performances overall, and I think that was the point you were making, Mr. Rhodes, in some cases, you have fewer than 10 students in a group, so you wouldn't even see this on a state exam. If it has less than 10, it would have an asterisk next to it, and it wouldn't be enough students to count in a student group. But we feel as though we need to put it out there, even if it's just a small group of students, to keep our eye on every student group and are we moving in the right direction. So with that said, this is the English Language Arts map data fall 2023 compared to spring. And here, I think we just made that point a moment ago. Last spring, we were at 31%. It was a 1% increase overall. And when you look at the individual student groups, you see from last spring compared to this spring with levels 4 and 5, African American, a 1% increase. English learners went from 0% to 5%. That is our smallest student group, because you are now talking about English language learners that are only in the grade levels that are being assessed.
So there was, in the spring of 2022, there was no English
No.
language learner?
At levels 4 and 5.
Levels 4 and 5.
But I'm just saying, so that's the first thing that's startling. While it's great that there was a 5% increase.
Right.
To me, it's jaw-dropping that we're going from 0 to that. What's the explanation, if there is one, to a 10% drop in economically disadvantaged from 2022 to 2023?
I don't know a specific explanation for why that dropped. I do know
Because
that
all
it's
the other subgroups
improved.
had I mean, modest, but
Right.
there wasn't an improvement. And I'm guessing that students can fall into more than one of these categories. You can be an English language learner and be economically disadvantaged.
Correct.
Correct? Okay.
Dr. Couch, just a question. I I need to check on this myself, but the economically disadvantaged in 2022 may have been the tail end of COVID, when all schools, when we didn't have the data tracked the same way that we track it now, so we may have seen some fluctuation with the percent that qualified as farm, I'm not sure. So that may have also played a factor.
Potentially, but
Yeah.
I think it would be negligible, really.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask a question, and that is that with all the data that we have here, and for those who are scoring or improving, I know there are other students who are not. So what are we doing as the school system to help them out so that they can reach, you know,
Absolutely.
a higher level?
So the specifics about what's happening day in and day out in the classroom have to do with the major shifts that happened in instruction. So I believe that we gave you an overview at the start of the year, but one of the big shifts in reading is the implementation of Orton Gillingham as part of our core curriculum for students that are in early childhood classrooms. That's a big shift. And that extends well beyond K through 3. So if you are still struggling at that point, it's more on a child-by-child basis, but we continue that same type of what you call intensive intervention. So Orton Gillingham is explicit instruction in those phonemic awareness and phonics skills that allow children to really build the bridge to get them over the hump to become a proficient reader. And we've seen that magic happen when you go back. I almost wish I could end with the opening slides, but those first 2 slides show the power of that shift of giving that attention in the early years. We are, again, one of the few districts in the state, if not the only one, that can say that we have had every kindergarten through 3rd grade teacher fully trained in Orton Gillingham. That other systems can't say that. And what we are doing is not just giving it to the few, but in the early years, giving it to everyone, a heavy dose, so that we really close that gap, and by the end of 3rd grade, our expectation is that everyone will be able to read. That's what's in our plan. 100% of our students will be proficient readers.
Now, how long have we been working with that program?
So Maryland Leads started a while ago with the foundational skills, but the application of Orton Gillingham as part of the core program, this is year 1.
Okay, so what do we do to help the students that didn't have that opportunity?
So now if you're looking at a child that's beyond grade 3 or beyond, we have morphology and we have other interventions that are part of that again, our teachers have had the training. In some cases in the middle school, it may be provided through a special educator that's had specialized training. And again, some of our coaches have had that training, and they are offering that same type of what you would call intensive intervention to allow the children to learn those missing skills.
And that's every student, we're sure we're not skipping some or paying close attention to these grades that these children are getting, because I know they have where no child is left behind, but yet, like I said, we need to make sure that they're ready to go on instead of just pushing them through, because if they don't have what it takes, we just, you push them to another grade and another level, and they're not ready for it. So sooner or later, they're pushed out in the shape that they're in. I mean,
And
they
I
haven't
would,
learned the
I would
proper
add
things.
that when each of the schools provided their spotlight and they talked about what they're doing and how they're measuring progress and progress
Yeah.
monitoring on a weekly basis, what they're doing to provide interventions, all of those things are happening so we can make sure that we're not leaving anyone behind, that we're trying to adjust and place them in groups that are fluid. So once they master those skills, then they go to a different group. So that happens in some cases daily and some cases at the secondary level weekly.
Okay, and if a child is not able to perfect these things or do good enough to get past D's and F's, is there a policy or something that they cannot be left
I
behind?
think what you're leading to is a process. So we have what's called SST, or a student support team. So let's just throw a scenario, that I'm hearing you say. If I'm a 7th grader, my report card is showing I'm not meeting with success, my scores are below level, do I just sit there or what happens? So every school has a student support team, and those teams meet in collaboration with the administrator on site, and they use, as I mentioned earlier, you would never base it on one score, so you'd look at the report card grades, you would look at this grade, and they determine if there's other specific assessments that may need to be done. Using the multiple assessments, they then make a decision. Does this, and that's what Dr. Couch was describing, does this child need something beyond what's happening in the general classroom, and now they're going to get an intensive intervention? In some cases, we offer some programs that are what you call double dosing, so they're getting more than one opportunity to learn those skills. But the last thing that I've seen happen in a classroom is for any of our teachers to just say, well, you know, that one, just let them go, and the rest will move along. I mean, the instruction continues, but I think there's a real strong sense of the power of personalizing the learning, and that's what we try to do.
Okay.
Can I ask a question? I know this, I guess right now is all about English language, and maybe this is a question for another time, but I've talked to a couple of elementary school teachers who say the Orton Gillingham is like the best thing that ever happened. Is there something corresponding to that we can do with math?
Wow. That's probably the same question last week when I was sitting around the table with Ms. Hemstetter and two of the math coordinators from the Maryland State Department of Education. And we said, what's happening in the other schools? Is there something we're missing in our core program? And there is not a math program similar to Orton Gillingham that just gives you that solid foundation of mathematics. They did share some best practices, and some of those pieces are what you're seeing implemented in our elementary classrooms with the math talks and building that number sense in the early years. But even at the state level, we've not heard of any magic math program.
Right. But I would add that we are participating with MSDE in terms of working with the middle school and doing weekly check-ins, if you will, and planning together, working on best practices, and identifying the areas and the skills that the students are lacking, and then trying to fill in those gaps. And we're one of two school systems that are working with MSDE, because we're trying to identify, is there something statewide that could benefit all of the school systems, because they're, to be quite honest about where everybody is as a state, math is a high needs area for every school system.
Yeah, I accept that. I mean, math scores have traditionally been low. It's been an Achilles heel for us
Right.
pre-pandemic, and then from what I've read, and it makes sense, that during the pandemic, when kids were not having the one-on-one with the in-person, you can kind of, your parents can read to you and they can maybe teach you how to read, but most parents can't teach you math.
Right.
So that just further handicapped us, and that, like I said, I mean, I guess reading is also foundational, but math is definitely, and if you can't get those you can't go to those higher levels, and ultimately you're going to get to high school, and there are requirements to be able to graduate.
We say all roads lead to algebra in math. I mean, you must get those foundational skills in order to, be able to successfully.
If you can't read, you're not going to be able to do the math. And you come up and bring all of these statistics up, and it's just like, it seems like it goes round and round. We got to break out of this rut, and I know you can do it. Let's do something different. Let's be innovative. Let's get our kids to learn. If the whole state's doing poorly, why can't we do better? Why can't we come up with a plan, Dr. Couch? Something that's innovative. I mean, I know everyone's following what Maeve is doing, but we're not doing something right. And I don't know what it is. I haven't been on here that long, but we've got to be able to change.
Well,
You've got to come up with a plan.
Right, I think we are trying to do that. We are working with the math experts at MSDE. We're trying to identify what are the best practices? What can we do as a school system that can be, and MSDE is trying to say, okay, so if this works, can we take that out statewide? So we're not just sitting and just trying to do the same thing and expecting a different result. We're looking at something different in terms of what we're doing. Is it because we're not teaching to the standards? Are there power standards that we need to focus on that we're not focusing on? So it's about working together as a professional learning community and identifying where our students are and then progress monitoring as we go. This data is very helpful to us because we're looking at that on a regular basis. We're progress monitoring like we've never done before, and we're trying to make a determination if what we're doing is working.
Does this
So-
have something to do with the blueprint? Are you considering that might be helping with this or not? Because that's going to bring in a lot of changes. Is that part of these figures?
Well, improving our math scores and improving our reading scores are part of the blueprint, yes.
Ultimately, helping with that college readiness piece as
Right.
well.
I guess one of the advantages, because there don't seem to be a whole lot of them, to being small is, and you've got different ways of assessing a particular student in their particular place, that we can individualize instruction, or at least individualize the teaching method that's going to connect with that kid. Is that right?
That is right, that's
Okay.
correct. And there's a very, again, not to overuse the word, but I don't think I can name another system that has as strong a collaboration as you'll see in our schools. Our teachers work together, and the principals have arranged master schedules, which is very transformative and innovative, to let their teachers have additional time together on a weekly basis to put their heads together to see, does this child perform better, or is there something that's happening in your class that you can share with me? It's that best practices approach that really can make a difference.
Well, I know, because I've been on the board long enough, that one of the arguments that was used to champion consolidating the middle school, which was that it allowed us, because we cut down the number of elementary schools we had, because we had some schools where you had 1/3 grade.
Right.
Well, when you have 1/3 grade, that teacher has nobody to collaborate with. So, I mean,
Makes a difference.
Yeah, I'm getting that, so.
We'll take a look at the math, and again, this is the math measures of academic progress. This is a local assessment, not a state assessment. In the center, where you see the green check, we were celebrating in the spring of last year. These are areas where targets were set and met in spring of 2023. So I think when President Getz was asking about how are you tracking the target, this is one of the ways that we're publicly tracking it as well. So going back in ELA, you did not see the evidence of the checks all along, but in math, there were several grade levels, as well as the district, where the target that was set based on the spring 22 data was they either met or exceeded that target. Now, let's be honest.
Yeah, but then come fall, those same kids in the next grade
Exactly.
level all went the wrong way. Almost all of them.
You'll see that slide again. That's right. And we saw the same thing last year when we looked at spring and we went into the fall. And on that fall assessment, we saw a slide. And again, I would love to be able to come up and say this is exactly the cause of the slide. We look at this child by child, school by school, as a district, and all the student groups, and the reasons and the causes vary from child to child. It's not a one-size-fits-all.
Right.
And again, the target that we are setting, the achieving at the 61st percentile or above, is a very rigorous target.
Yeah, I'd be interested if there is an explanation, because, and I'm going to use politically incorrect language, and I apologize ahead of time. You don't get dumb from third grade to fourth grade. It's the same kids, so if they could hit those targets, now is it because the level of what they're learning and being tested on, the bar's been raised, and in first grade it's 1 + 1, and now when you get in second grade it's your times tables or whatever, but it just seems a head scratcher as universally the trajectory is this way.
Right.
Question, is this the same chart when you put it together that's compared to the whole state of Maryland? We're at the bottom.
So this has
This
nothing to
is-
do with that.
I'm just saying,
Yeah.
I understand that, but we are at the bottom of the state of Maryland on math scores. We're close to it, next to Baltimore or somewhere in there.
I think you're talking about this, on the state assessment, the measure, not the measures of academic progress,
I'm
but
just
the MCAT.
talking about math in general. We're down near the bottom.
So the state assessment, on this, we're looking at all grade levels, K through 8, and on the state assessment, you're looking at grades 3 through 8 and Algebra 1.
Okay.
And where you're describing is Algebra 1 in particular, because no, we were not at the bottom in all grade levels, but in Algebra 1, our students were performing at a low level, and I think you and I had talked about that. So they were somewhere around 7%, but the range of scores for the state, what we're calling the high achieving, we're one of the low achieving, the high was at 20-something%. So again, I don't think that's anything to boast about. I think the state is in a crisis in the area of mathematics, and that's why we're seeing across the state, the alarms are ringing and saying, is it the assessment? Is it something what is going on in the area of math?
Are the teachers teaching correctly? That's what I'm concerned about. I mean, the kids are doing poorly. I mean, why are they doing poorly in math? We have all these math teachers, we have all this money coming into our system, and you're in charge of this, and Dr. Couch is. How come we're not doing better? I mean, the whole state, you say, oh, this whole state's the same way. Why can't we break out of this mold and leave the state?
So one of the powerful steps that we are taking as a system in the area of trying to take a look at the cause and effect relationship with math achievement and what it is that we can do to untangle that, I think part of the story, if we're looking at this chart, is looking at the percent of students and where they're scoring in levels 3, 4, and 5. Because now you're looking at students that are on the cusp and on the trajectory to proficiency.
Well, let's clarify that a little bit too, because the measure that we took as a school system is we use levels 4 and 5, when in reality, a portion of the level 3s are proficient as well. So according to this NWEA, it doesn't mean if you score a 3 that you're not proficient. In some cases, it's the middle of the road. So you might have a range of scores of 20 points. Well, maybe half of those are proficient. So it was too hard for us to measure and determine which of the 3s were proficient. So that's why we put them in 3, 4s, and 5s, and 4s and 5s. At the state level, that's the same thing. There's a portion in the MCAP, there's a portion of the students in level 3 that are proficient based on the range of scores for proficiency. So, so we just went ahead and characterized them as 4s and 5s are definitely proficient, but just a reminder that a portion of the 3s are also proficient as well.
We have some incredibly strong math students, and I don't know that you're seeing evidence this when we're reading it looking at the data the way that we're looking at it here. But one of the big differences that we see with students being proficient in math from when some of the audience members here tonight were in school versus the assessment that our students are taking is their math proficiency is also measured through their writing. And that we acknowledge is an area of need. In other words, it's not enough to accurately solve the problem, but they must explain in writing how you arrived at that solution.
Right.
And that becomes a barrier for many of our students. So that's something in the area of writing that we're working on in terms of teacher training, when we were saying what is the support that our classroom teachers need to help move this along. It would be really understanding what it is to help students express themselves. So That's one piece. And another area that's measured, and these are what you call, you'll hear Ms. Hemstetter refer to this sometimes, the soft skills, helping our students become better with things like productive struggle, being able to hang in there and work through the problem and actually show your work, because it's not just scored where you zip it in and get the score out. You actually have, they're looking at every single mark on the student's paper to see if that counts toward giving them credit for that problem. So in some cases, our math students were 1 to 2 questions away from proficiency. So again, I think that makes it for us very hopeful that we can get across that hump and help them cross the finish line.
Do you think that the one thing that's missing, or that I can see that is missing, over the years, that when I was in school, or my kids, not the last one that I took in, but the 2 before, were in school, we could actually help them with their math, and now they don't have that. I think that that was an essential part, something that was needed, to do home as well as in school, to continue, the practice or whatever. It just seems like that we want to just say it's the teachers, but it's not necessarily the things that are still the same. Maybe it's the things that have changed, like the type of math that we're doing. I mean, we're getting the same answer in many cases, but all of a sudden we can't do it the same way.
Correct.
And the children aren't understanding it. Most, if you talk to them, a lot of them that have poor grades tell you they just don't understand. And they stopped understanding a long time ago. So how are they going to do anything better going up grades? I mean, because one thing connects to another. And they have to do so many steps. This is why if we're in the grocery store and we need our change and the machine shuts down, you're going to have the wrong change. And someone like me, I'm almost 60 years old. And if the machine shut down, I can still give you your change. And I'm not that educated. Excuse me, I shouldn't say that on YouTube. But I'm just telling you, I mean, but you take children and the school,
Right, I think you make a really important point, and that is, our parents do want to be involved and support, but one of the areas that we need to continue to improve is how can we help our parents help their students?
Yeah.
And we have several schools in Kent County that are considered community schools, and one of the things that allows the schools to do is go above and beyond in providing those wraparound services. In some cases, it's training and support for families, and in other cases, it's tutoring beyond the day, one-on-one with a child to help them, again, acquire some of those basic skills. One other innovative thing that's happening at Kent County High School is Principal Hemstetter is working with her team so that they can also begin some targeted tutoring student to student in the high school. I thought, again, that's pretty cool. We hadn't thought about that before, but I have to give the high school team credit for that. So they're beginning a process whereby some of the more advanced math students in the high school will have an opportunity to help other peers. And sometimes it's just that watching someone work through a process that will help it click, rather than getting it in a class of 21. I will, again, repeat, the thinking, the problem solving, the energy to change this trajectory. I can't name a principal or teacher that's going to work harder than our staff members here. They are constantly immersing themselves in this data to say, what else is it that we can do? This is a look at the math scores by school, and there are some celebrations within this data. Again, looking at those that have met the target, and in some cases exceeded the target by far. And what is happening in those schools is exactly the type of conversation that goes on when we have our learning walk, as well as our monthly administrative meetings, which have a heavy focus on instruction as part of that collaboration as well. We did the same breakdown in math as we did in ELA, and that is by student group. Again, you'll see similar challenges where you see a decrease, as you heard earlier, in the free and reduced meal percentages, and in some cases, an improvement from one area to the other. fall of this year, when we go across from 4s and 5s, every single student group has had slide right across the board. Free and reduced meals, students with disabilities, English learners, and African American students. We designed and presented the fall dashboard 2 years ago, and this was a way, it had not existed prior to Dr. Couch coming on board. We never had a display of our data, and again, this is another way to hold feet to the fire. So every year, year after year, we are putting to the public our scores, both in the 4-5 and the 3-4-5, and a summary across of how we are doing in all areas, including all of our student groups. And this is the work that we will continue. So we have proposed for this year to continue to keep the higher level where we left off in the spring for our goal setting, and to double the expected increase in proficiency using a 4% overall increase, with our ELA goal moving to 35% and math to 35% as well. You can see all of the student groups, so each of these percentages reflect 2 times the state growth projection.
Right, and this is the percentage of growth we want to see by subgroup.
By student group, yes. So with that, I will just ask if there are any questions or thoughts about the goal setting for this year, or any other comments related to the achievement data.
I like your goals. I want them at, you need to meet these goals, okay? I need you to work as hard as you can, and I know it can be done, but we have to work hard. You got this blueprint plan coming in, you have more money coming in, the teachers are gonna be getting better salaries, and I know they're working hard, but we have to do better, and we can, so.
Thank you.
Are there any additional questions or comments?
Is it from the audience?
No. Okay, thank you, Ms. Giacomo, appreciate it. Thank you so much.
You want to pass those down?
Yeah,
She might want these. Pass these down to Tricia
Oh.
when she comes back.
thank you.
I got more of them if she needs them.
Absolutely. Okay, the next item on the agenda is personnel. Mr. Hushin?
Thank you, President Getz, Dr. Couch, school board members. Tonight, I have one personnel action that administration is bringing forward to seek approval. With that said, the administration seeks approval of that stated personnel action.
And just as a reminder, we talked about this in closed session at the last board meeting, that these names would be brought forward.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, as Mr. Hutchins stated, the administration is recommending approval of these stated personnel actions. Do we have a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Ms. Dorsey has the motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Ms. McKee has the second. Any further comments or questions? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and call for the vote. All those in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing no opposition, the motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Hushin. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
We will go ahead and move on to the special needs bus lease purchase. Ms. Stewart?
Good evening, everyone. Dr. Couch, President Getz, members of the board. Tonight, I bring before you the lease purchase financing approval. Administration is requesting board approval to finance with J.P. Morgan Chase for a lease purchase agreement to obtain a new special needs school bus. The current special needs school bus that we have will be sunsetting. I believe it's I want to say this one is the following, next year. We do have a bus that is sunsetting this year, though, as well. We are looking to go with a lease.
What do you mean by that? Does that mean it's
out of
life
service.
What is it, 15 years, or what is it?
I don't remember, it's either 13 or
Okay, so I
15
thought,
years,
yeah,
something like that. So we can no longer use it at that point. So we are looking to do a lease purchase agreement with J.P. Morgan Chase Two of our neighboring counties currently have, one, Queen Anne's County currently has a lease purchase agreement for 2 special needs buses now. And then Cecil County, I believe, fully uses JP Morgan Chase with their financing. That's their banking, that's all their financial operations. We are requesting a lease purchase agreement for the cost of the SPED bus, which is $156,180. The rate for the lease purchase will be 5.7%, and it will be for 7 years at a fixed payment of $27,680.
And just as a reminder, this was on our approved budget for this year.
How are we looking at supply? I mean, if it is approved this evening, what's the turnaround time?
I think Mr. Wheeler said that it's in production at this point.
Yes, when I last talked to Mr. Wheeler, January, we were thinking December, but now it's going to be January where we will have the bus.
Okay.
So administration is asking for board approval for the lease purchase of the new special needs bus through JP Morgan Chase.
Okay, as Ms. Stewart has just mentioned, the administration is requesting board approval to obtain a lease purchase financial agreement with JP Morgan Chase to purchase a new special needs school bus. Do we have a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Mr. Rhodes has the motion. Do we have a second?
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Following up on what Mr. Getz asked.
Sure.
So is the expectation that once the bus is available, we'll put it into service now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Even though it's hasn't been quote-unquote sunsetted yet?
It hasn't sunrise yet.
Yeah. I think
We're just
the
trying to
plan-
get out ahead of the curve?
Right.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, that's what
Okay.
we're trying to do. And then also, when it comes to a lease purchase, getting the invoice, it's the easier to turn around so that we can start making the payment as well.
So at the end of 7 years, we'll own it, and we'll still have 8 years
Yes.
before it
Yes.
gets put out to pasture? Okay.
Correct.
Okay, Mr. Rhodes has the motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Ms. McGee. Any further comments or questions? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing no opposition, the motion passes. Thank you,
Thank
Ms.
you.
Stewart. Appreciate it. Okay, we're going to move into the school spotlight for Galena Elementary School.
Good evening, Dr. Couch, President Getz, and the board, and all of you.
Good evening.
I am Becky Yoder, and principal of Galena Elementary, and I have Rachel Hopkins with me, who is my Title I interventionist, and also slash instructional coach. How do I make it? Ah, perfect, okay. Oh, there we go, thanks. All right, so our areas of focus for this year that we're gonna talk about for right now is, number one is our academy time, which is our intervention time, so we'll go into more detail on that. This year, our educational focus is really looking at our English language learners as well as our special education learners, looking at our data, and we were identified as an ATSI school by the state of Maryland. So,
So what does that mean? What's
so that
ATS?
additional targeted supports. So they're saying that these two groups, as well as our Hispanic learners, are not performing to the degree in which we want them to perform. So we are really taking a big focus on those student groups this school year.
Is that anything that sort of helped us get a Judy Center?
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
And then the last is how we're using our teacher collaborative grant that Mr. Hushin has been a part of as well. So we'll go into more details on those things. Oh, there we go. So our academy time is a devoted time. We call it AT at Galena. Is a devoted time for intervention for some students, additional Tier 1 practice for some students, and or enrichment for other groups of students. So we kind of look at every kiddo and meet to find out what the specifically needs, and then put them with a staff member that can provide that support to them. So, do you wanna, I'm gonna give this to you to kind of talk about as well.
So for our academy time, we meet regularly and we look at data. All the decisions are data-driven and the groups are fluid. So when we meet as grade level teams, we decide based on the data what each student group needs, and that's different from the categories that you just saw. For example, a student learning English as a second language may actually be in our G&T group based on data. So just so we're clear, those are two different use of that word. And when we do AT, our academy time, Ms. Yoder had made a schedule this year based on something that we noticed last year. We staggered it in a way that like we could have all the adults, all of our available staff pushing in to support one grade level. So for example, with our student support coaches, this person may be mostly working with fourth grade, but from 12:30 to 1:15, this person is helping first grade because it's all hands on deck during AT time. So
Are the student support coaches, are they the ones that we're paying with the grant?
Yeah,
And
Maryland
this- Yeah, and they're part-timers, right?
5 hours.
5 hours a
Okay.
Yeah. So that would also include like RAs, our special education teachers, tutors that we hire through Title I or through TSI funds. So TSI is a grant funded as well.
Yeah, so we're trying to get our groups down to as small as possible so that they're getting instruction from an adult is in as small a group as possible to really target to their specific needs of that group.
When we think about academy time, we kind of think about, so core 1 instruction is what the teacher is doing. Let's say we're in 4th grade. Everyone in 4th grade is doing the same thing during our ELA block because that's our core curriculum, that's our content. And then when the teacher meets with those kids in small groups, she helps that student access the grade level standard in a way that works for them based on their needs. This time is thinking about if I'm in 4th grade and I'm getting my core curriculum with my teacher, I'm working with her in small groups to help, let's say I need extra support. So she's helping me access that skill during small group time, and this is a way where we're meeting kids from where they are and pushing them up. So it may be, I need extra help with comprehension strategies, or I need extra help with something that is outside of what's happening in my 4th grade core curriculum. So we do data and progress monitoring to track that and make adjustments as needed.
So what we did a couple of years ago, when I was doing my master schedule, I noticed that my gym teacher and my media person had some common times when they didn't have students in their classrooms. So I worked out the master schedule that then the gym teacher and the media person could go into the regular classroom because the gym teacher's a teacher, so she could go into that classroom, and then the media person could go into the other classroom, teacher's classroom, and we could meet with them during the school day. So on Mondays, we have grade level meetings. There's a meeting in the morning for 45 minutes and a meeting in the afternoon for 45 minutes. So today was a Monday. So this morning we met with our 3rd grade teachers, the special education teachers that work with 3rd grade, and the EL teacher if she works with that grade level. And we all sit around the table and we talk about, okay, during AT time, during that intervention time, this is what I've been doing with my group. We have a spreadsheet that they put the data in so that we can look at that data and see, are kids making progress in the group that they're in? If they are making progress, do they need to stay in that group or should they be moved to a different group? If they're not making progress, why are they not making progress and how can we better meet those needs? So it's really a nice time to talk about students during the school day and problem solve together as a collective group. and we're all looking at the same students and all talking about students together. Is there anything you want to add to that?
I don't think so. Well, the one thing I would like to add is Becky does a nice job of putting out a schedule in a year in advance, right? So there's going to be, this is my December date, this is my January date. So the expectation is clear about when to show up and what to show up with. So when we leave the next meeting, we say, okay, this is how many data points we want to see next time. Here's what we're going to be looking for. So it really is a productive time that
Yeah, and we have running notes, so teachers can at any time go back and look at those notes to figure out what we had talked about, to remember what we talked about, to say, oh, that's right, in our next meeting, we need to have this information ready to share. So we said that we were gonna give the benchmark assessments, or we were gonna talk about Wonders unit assessments, or we were gonna talk about math assessments, so that teachers know ahead of time what they're bringing with them, what data they're looking at, so that we can make sure that we're best meeting the needs of all of our students. Our instructional focus, as I said, was really looking at our English language learners and our special education learners, and really not only at our AT time, but also at that Tier 1 instruction time. So that meant having all teachers feel that these students are our students. Everyone's responsibility to help move them forward. So for our English language learners, the things that we've put in place is that all of our teachers in pre-K, through K through 2 have been trained in Orton Gillingham, as well as our special education teachers and our EL teachers. There was additional funding for our English language learners and our Hispanic students and our special education students through that ATSI designation. So we bought additional Orton Gillingham materials for students so that every student had multi-sensory materials accessible to them. So that might look like a tray with sand in, that they're writing letters in sand. That also meant that they have screens, that they put paper on the screen, so that it's kind of giving them some sensory pushback on those screens. With that money, we've also hired a part-time EL tutor, which is Dawn Webb, which is a well-qualified person who has a master's degree in ESOL education, and she's doing 10 hours a week for us, pushing into the gen ed classrooms, really supporting our early learning readers.
Can I ask you about that for just a
Sure,
second?
yeah.
Because at the last Citizens Advisory Commission meeting, we had a discussion and a presentation that it seems like having an EL tutor is a huge need in all of our schools. So, not trying to put you on the spot, but I'm just trying to gauge, is 10 hours enough? I mean, could you benefit? I mean, from what I understand is, we actually have the money, we can't find the tutors.
That is very correct. That is
Okay.
correct.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay.
Last year, we have historically, Galena has been having the highest Hispanic population. However, Garnett is now very close to us.
Really?
So, in the past, we've had a person and a half for our English language learners. This year, I only had one person. So when I got this additional funding, my first thoughts were, the best way to help these kiddos is to get another qualified person in here.
Right.
And Dawn had just retired, and I knew she had a degree, so I kind of was like, would this be something that you might be interested in? We're really looking at, so it is very hard to find. I think we're still on the hunt.
Right,
for-
and one of our Citizens Advisory Committee members also indicated that she would put the word out in community as well, and no luck in finding. And it's actually a statewide deficiency, if you will. Nobody can seem to find EL teachers. It's really difficult.
was gonna say, as a new duty center, just finding
Yeah.
someone part-time to just act as a translator for those families. We haven't been able to fill that, which is, you know, a need as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The school district has purchased a Genie app for us, so in translation, that has been extremely helpful for us.
It's on-demand
yes,
translations.
And it connects you directly to a live person. So it's almost like an instant Zoom meeting. So I can explain, like, this is the situation that I'm in. I have had this parent come in. They need to register their child for school. This is kind of what we're going to be doing. This is the process for that, to kind of give the translator some information. And they have been fantastic. I have yet to get anybody on the
At
app.
that CAC meeting, we had one of the high school's representatives was a teacher, and she was talking about what a difference, it was the difference for the student, because
Yes.
it's not a fair assessment of a student when English is not their first language about how intelligent they are or how they're able to learn. The language is the barrier.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right,
okay.
right, yes. And then the last thing, or one of the last things that we've kind of put in place, so I'm really just talking about things that may not have been in place last year that we've put in place this year to help out, is Origo Box of Facts training, which is for math, and it's teaching the strategy behind the math facts, so not just pure memorization of math facts, but it's teaching them the strategy behind the math facts. So we had a in-person training for all of the staff members. We've had a virtual training for all staff members, and we are in the process of putting that into place in every classroom K through 5. And then over on the special education side, yeah, please.
Sorry, I just wanted to
please,
clarify one thing too, because I hope this wasn't confusing when we talk about EL tutors and the need for translators being two separate needs, but both working together to kind of like what Ms. Dorsey was saying, build capacity with parents and help them feel like they're a part of our school community. And they desperately want to help their children too. And so without kind of those connections, we noticed that was a real need for our community, that they wanted to be involved and they just didn't know how. So I just want to make sure I wasn't confusing the EL tutor and the translator, but rather how they work together to build capacity with parents and how both are needed to successfully help this subgroup.
Yeah, and that's part of our SIP plan too, and with Title I too, is, you know, reaching out to our families that don't typically come to our events at night. You know, how can we bring more people in, get a more diverse population coming into our events at night? You typically see the same, you know, parents over and over again. So how can we reach out to parents who might be feeling intimidated because we're not speaking Spanish or we're not speaking a different language? We're always speaking in English at our events. So how can we make it more welcoming for them?
I remember a couple of years ago, you weren't the principal yet, and I can't remember who the principal was, but they had a sort of a Hispanic-themed event, you know, that really engaged that
Yes.
community. They brought their food, they
Yes,
played
yeah.
their games. It was a huge turnout.
It sure was.
Yeah.
It sure was. Unfortunately, there's some restrictions now over, you know, preparing food and all of
Okay,
that.
yeah.
But no, because we've talked about that several times, you know, how do we bring that back? Because that was so very successful and had
And it
such a
wasn't just
great
the
showing.
Hispanic, it was a huge turnout by
Right.
the Hispanic community, but the rest of the community came as well, which
Right.
was a nice thing.
Yeah, we talked about it several times. On the special education side, again, we have the Wharton Gillingham training, which is a multi-sensory, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a second. That we have several people trained, and we're actually looking at now training our 2 third grade teachers as well, because we got some additional funding. Again, we purchased some more Wharton Gillingham materials for students to use so that every student had their own materials to use. The Origo Box of Facts training, which we'll get into in a little more depth too. And then our special educators meet together with our teacher specialist, who is also our IEP chair, weekly to review their caseloads and to continue to monitor progress. So our teacher specialist has really taken, Rachel Gugasian has really taken the lead on that. and has been working very closely. We have 3 relatively new special educators in our building, so she's really working with them to make sure that they understand the IEP process, that they understand what the IEP goals and the SDI, specialized designed instruction that those students need, and to monitor and make sure that all those kids are making progress towards those IEP goals. So I'm going to turn it over to Rachel to let her talk about Orton Gillingham, because she has also been Orton Gillingham trained and I have not. So I'm going to let her do some talking about that.
Okay. Orton Gillingham is a structured, explicit approach to literacy. There are key components to every lesson, and Orton Gillingham is also known for being multisensory. When we think about the chunks of the lesson, it starts with phonemic awareness, so that would be like when we think about skills that are rhyming or anything sounds and syllables. So for example, I might say a word and then ask you to take away the beginning sound, or say a word and ask you to take away the beginning syllable. So all that is done with no representation of symbols. And then you would move into the next part of it where you're reviewing your letter sounds. So it kind of progresses you through, and then you would learn a new linkage, and then you apply it to reading and writing, and then you're practicing reading for fluency on a passage that you can decode. Red words are sight words, and there's a 3-part drill. We have had so much wonderful feedback from teachers who feel like they finally have the tools they need to help their struggling readers.
Yeah, no, I think, and then moving into the decodable readers, I think that also gives students then the chance to be successful with the skills that they're being taught in class. Then it transfers into reading of the text. And that's where we really want them to be. We want them diving into and reading text.
What's a decodable reader?
A decodable reader is, it can be many different levels. So, for example, if I'm in the 1st grade and I'm just reading CVC words, like consonant, vowel, consonant, and maybe I know this handful of red words or sight words, like it's going to only have those words in them, so I'm not going to be presented with words that I don't have the skills to read yet. So if I were working with you, Trish, I would say, okay, I know that we've mastered these skills, so I'm giving you this reader because I know you can read everything in this. So that would be like on your level, whereas the class, the readers that we're using in small groups might be a little bit higher than that, because we still want them to access that grade level text. We're not saying because you can't read, you're not getting exposed to grade level text. We're saying, here's how you're practicing what you're learning, and here's how you're going to apply it to your grade level text. So, and that's when we would practice like fluency, like reading at a good pace with prosody, right? We wouldn't ask you to read a 4th grade text if you're struggling at a good pace with prosody, but you should still be able to access that with the skills that we're working on. So, multisyllabic words, like breaking them down and saying, oh, I see a little part like in this word that I know, and I can use what I know about this part to put it together. So it's not going to look the same, but they're still accessing the text and reading the text.
So I do character counts for kindergarten and 1st grade, and I know last year in the spring, I was in kindergarten, and we were reading a book, and they were learning sight words, and I don't know what the word was, but the was in whatever that word was, and I didn't even know what they were talking about. They're like, that's a sight word. So,
yeah.
Right. And I would add that the difference that we're doing this year as opposed to last year is OG is integrated into the core program. So it's part of Tier 1 instruction. So every student is getting OG. And it's integrated into the way we are teaching reading in every grade level in the elementary school.
Can I add that I went through elementary school and Orton Gillingham was not part of my curriculum at all, and I learned to read a very different way than these kids are learning to read, as I see when I go to my internship every day. And I do want to say that there are times where I'm learning with these kids. I'm learning these new things with my 2nd graders every day, and I'm learning the Orton Gillingham, and it's included in everyday instruction, which is really awesome to see. But I truly believe that this makes so much more sense to me than the way I learned to read. This is going to produce test scores that will, I believe that this will improve our test scores greatly compared to the kids that are in my class that are in high school now. So I feel like it's a
Right.
very big improvement.
And because we're so small, and I think we talked about this at the opening meeting that we had with our teachers, we trained every single teacher
That's huge.
in primary. That's huge.
Huge, that's a huge deal. And to kind of circle back to AT, you know, if we're both teaching first grade and most of our class, 80% is hitting those grade level skills, we can keep moving on knowing that at intervention time, those kids are going to get the
Right.
support they need where they are, but we're not holding the rest of our first grade class back.
Right.
So that's the benefit too of having all these people trained is we have these flex groups say, okay, well now you got that skill, we're going to bump you to this group. So it's really, I mean, I can't speak to this enough as the impact that it makes on reading, but also how that translates into writing. I mean, it takes the intimidation out of it, and it empowers kids to use skills, not just like, try your best, what do you think? It's like, use what you know and apply it. So this is not limited to reading, the application into writing and the implications that that has for us is huge as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So how do we pay for this? Do we get a grant, or what led us to this road?
Grant.
Okay.
Yeah, so I have to attribute this to the staff that took the time to write the grant, and then commitment from our teachers to actually step up and do the training, because it's a week-long training. So we had to put in some cases, we had to bring a substitute in their class for an entire week, and then they went to the training. Some of our teachers also trained during the summer.
So will we continue to teach this way?
We're actually getting a trainer. It's a train-the-trainer model, so we're going to have an in-house trainer in our school system, so that we can continue on with ensuring that our teachers are trained, because when we have turnover, we're going to have other
Right,
teachers that need the training. So and it's a lot to become a trainer, so the individual that's becoming our trainer is going through pretty intensive training right now.
And all teachers said it was very intense, but so worth it.
Yeah.
And are very excited about the results that they've been seeing already. And I know we are looking at trying to fund for grades 3 through 5 it just totally went out of my brain. What's the next one? Morphology, yes, for the older grades. So we're super excited about that too, that possibility.
And just one more thing about
Yep.
Orton Gillingham, because I'm so
You
passionate
are.
about this, and I think it's going to be a game changer for us. When we think about kids who are like already reading, like why would they need to be in the classroom like everyday core curriculum? And it goes back to writing,
Reinforcement.
and also when we've seen a lot of kids where we're like, oh, they were reading in the first grade, what happened? When they get to multisyllabic words, there's a breakdown because they didn't know the skill or the strategy. So I really think that this is a great use of the funds and a great use of an investment in the teachers' training as well.
Right. So then, we also, I heard a need from our teachers saying that our kids need to learn the facts. The kids need to learn their facts. And I was trained in Origo when I was in the classroom, and I felt very strongly that Origo doesn't just teach you the facts, it teaches you the strategy behind the facts, so that you could access the answer without just rote memorization. So if I don't have, say, I don't have 4 times 3 memorized, well, if I know that the 4s are double-double, then I know that I have to double 3 once, oh, that's 6, and 6 doubled again is 12, so 4 times 3 is 12. So it's really teaching them the strategy behind it. I'm working with a 5th grade AT time, so I have a 5th grade math group that I work with every day, and we've been working on these facts. So we've done 2s, 4s, and 8s, because you can see here that they're all in that doubling strategy. So when we're multiplying by 2s, 4s, and 8s, 2s you double once, 4s you double twice, and 8s you double 3 times. So I have, my one student is just great at, so if I'm doing 3 times 8, all right, then I'm gonna do 3 plus 3 is 6, 6 plus 6 is 12, 12 plus 12 is 24. Oh, so I doubled that 3 times. Oh, so 8 times 3 is 24. So like really understanding that strategy behind multiplication. They start with addition and subtraction facts. They do the subtraction and division is that if I know addition, then I can do subtraction by making that turnaround fact. So think addition when you're subtracting, think multiplication when you're doing division. And I just started my group with talking about division and how they can take that information that they know from multiplication and apply it to division today. And that kiddo that I was just talking about, like lights just went off. Like, oh, okay, I get it. Like if I know this, then I can do that. So I think too, like providing teachers with training has been super important. Not just handing them something and saying, here you go, use this in your classroom. I think really the training behind it has been super important to us. So we had, like I said, they had a half-day in-person training with an instructor from Origo in September, then tried to implement it, and then we had a virtual training just a couple of PLCs ago where it was 2.5 hours of virtual training where we could ask questions, and there's an online piece like how to access everything online. So we really want to get our students talking about math and understanding math, not just rote memorization. Anything else?
Yeah, so the 3 stages of the learning process, while we're always working to build kids up from where they are, we have to always be mindful of helping them access where they should be. And when we think about 3 stages of learning in math, we go from the concrete, like a manipulative, to a picture, you know, whether it be dots, and then the symbol, which is the number. So often we want to jump right to the symbol. Well, if a kid doesn't understand what 5 really is, then not only are they having trouble with facts, but when they go to apply it to a higher level thinking question, or when they have to write about it, it's all lost. So thinking about how we can help kids not just with their facts, but with everything based on, so even if I'm in a grade and I'm struggling with something, like I can use a manipulative to do that to help bridge to the abstract.
And I think too that goes back to what Ms. Dorsey was saying earlier. You know, a lot of times we were just taught the algorithm. Remember that, you know, you have to do this first, then this, then this, then this. And you could follow that procedure, but you had no idea what you were doing.
Or why you were doing it.
Or why you were
Yeah.
doing it, right? So then, when you got to middle school and high school, your math skills fell apart because you didn't truly understand that underlying foundation, that concrete understanding of math. And that's what we're trying to give our students, is that concrete knowledge of why they're doing what they're doing. Which again, goes into being able to explain why they did what they did.
And not just saying like, I know this is the answer.
Right, yeah, because.
Because getting the answer right gets you 1 point, and writing
Yep.
about it gets
Yep.
you the points.
Yeah.
That's where we need to be, right? We need to be writing about it, and even if we can just get a little bit of a something to start with, and starting in, you know, the earlier grades, really working on the foundational skills with Orton Gillingham for ELA, and then Origo for math. And
So I guess Origo is part of my answer to the question I asked you, if there's a math correlation.
Right, well, we don't have solid data to say that's going to make a difference, but
Okay.
we're trying different things so
Okay.
that we can find what really works, and then that'll be the best practice.
yeah, this is
So
how we're
your
addressing the
your
need.
names will be attached to the copyright.
Yeah.
We're trying.
And so it's beyond just like computation of facts. So it's really designed to improve mathematical thinking skills, and it's very social by nature. There's a lot of games, and it really encourages kids to talk about mathematics and use terms like math vocabulary. And we all know if you can't talk about it, you certainly can't write about it. So we've got to start getting them talking about it, even in those early grades.
Yes, and there's so much vocabulary to understand in math that if you don't understand the vocabulary, there's no way you can even get to the answer. If you don't know what an equilateral triangle is, if you don't know the word equilateral, you know, you're out of luck. So really, you know, focusing on math vocabulary is also something very important to us as well.
Thinking about too, like math strategies, like when I went to school, like you got like a paper that had 30 facts on it and you had a minute to solve it. And so instead of doing like, we don't go right to that. We teach a strategy, we master that strategy. We teach a strategy, we master that strategy. And then by the end, that page is not intimidating because you have a way to solve all those problems efficiently, so like fast and accurately. So we would never like say count on 200. And the kids will be able to explain to you, because it's a lot of opportunities to make mistakes, and that's gonna take us forever. So what would we do instead? So I can say 100, 200, and use open number lines to skip. So it's really given them a lot to physically touch and use, and then be able to apply to.
So I'm curious, what has the students' response been? Are they excited?
They love games,
Yeah.
and that's so it's
Yeah.
like, you know, and it's in that way it's, you know, research based through play, and it's.
And I'm going to say too, it goes hand in hand with the illustrative math program that is the core Tier 1 instructional program. It has the same values, the same foundations, and it just kind of blends right in, and it's not something new and different.
Yeah, that's
it
an
has the
important
same
point.
philosophies. So I think once they find out that this is going to help them to learn and understand that, we're doing it mostly in small groups. During small group rotations with trained staff. So I think we're going to start to see some progress, you know. If they've got a word problem, but they can't do the math behind the word problem, then, you know, they're not going to be able to answer the question.
Have you seen a change in students' behavior? I mean, from what I've read, there's a certain stigma to not being able to learn, or you can't get a thing, and then kids get defensive and they act out, as opposed to now kids learning how to learn, changing their personalities and making them more confident learners.
I mean, I think that one benefit of AT time is everybody's doing something. So it's not like I'm getting pulled out to do a special thing with 2 other kids. Everybody's doing something. Everybody's going somewhere. Everybody's working on something. So it really takes like the stigma of that away. And kids are definitely more confident because they have that time dedicated to meet them where they are, to build them to where they need to be. And it's data-driven for teachers, but also students. I mean, there's clear goals. When you get to this group, you know that we're working on this skill, and we're going to monitor it through whatever the progress monitoring that matches that goes with. So they know what they're there for. They know how to move on. And that control is very motivating. Sorry, one more thing. Just important that it doesn't take away from our, like, what we're doing for math, right? This is just a part of what's happening in small group time. So when you're like, oh gosh, well, that's not competing with what we're doing for, you know, our core curriculum. It's not in competition with, it's in support of.
I got it.
And then something super exciting that we've been doing is through the Teacher Collaborative Grant, and that's learning from one another. We have so much knowledge and value already in the building. So how can we learn from one another? So this has really given us a chance to do that. So just in my building, I have 4 new or first year to Kent County teachers. I had 4 non-tenure teachers, and I have 5 teachers that are teaching at a new grade level this year. So we definitely had a need, and so when this came about, it was very timely. So the collaborative grants gave us access to an instructional assistant. So what we've been doing is Rachel Gagasian, who's the teacher specialist, has really kind of taken on the lead on this, and she sets up times for teachers to observe one another, they set their purpose. So if I'm going in right now, like with Orton Gillingham, If I have a more tenured teacher who really is doing it well, then I can take a brand-new teacher, put her into that classroom so she can observe that lesson, and that instructional assistant then will go into the classroom so that teacher is freed up to go ahead and observe. And so they'll say ahead of time, like, okay, so when you come in to watch this lesson, I want you to watch how I've set up the structures. I want you to watch how I've organized my materials, because there are a lot of materials that go with it. So really setting that purpose and knowing ahead of time what they're going to be looking for and what they're going to be talking about as their reflection after the session's over. There's pairs of teachers working together, observing, and then after the observation's over and they've reflected, then they plan together to help that teacher then plan for her lessons in her classroom. So it's really a give and take of two teachers working together to improve instruction. So we have found that we put out a survey, like who all would like to do this, and every one of our teachers say that they want to go in other teachers' classrooms and watch other teachers, because that's the way that you gain the best skills, is by watching somebody doing something that's doing it well. So we're excited about the Teacher Collaborative Grant and really putting that into place this school year. So, are there any other questions?
And I might add, the Teacher Collaborative Grant is at every school. We're doing this at every single school. So it gives our teachers an opportunity to go in and learn from each other, and again, able to apply best practices from around the district and then within a school as well.
Great. Are there any additional questions, comments?
Just thank you.
Thank you both for spending
Thank
time
you.
with us. I
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the board handbook discussion. This is a continuing discussion looking at revisions that have been suggested. Certainly a time for the board to talk about those options. So Dr. Couch, did you want to lead off in the conversation, and then
Sure.
we'll go from there?
Right. We, during our retreat, we had an opportunity to dedicate some time to talk about the changes that some board members wanted to add to the Board of Ed handbook. Just to note, we did adopt an updated handbook on August the 14th, and then during our retreat, we had an opportunity to talk about some of the suggestions. I know that Mr. Rhodes submitted some suggestions. We had an opportunity to go through all of those at the retreat. We didn't have a chance to talk about some of the suggestions that Ms. Sullivan provided. And so I integrated those into the handbook because that's where she noted they would fall in the handbook itself. So I'm not sure how you would like to proceed, Mr. Getz, if you want to revisit Mr. Rhodes' suggestions or go straight towards discussing Ms. Sullivan's. I will yield to your
Yeah, what I'd like to do is we'll take a look at what's in our handbook as listed as read.
Okay.
So Ms. Sullivan's and then Mr. Rhodes, we can circle back and go from there and then kind of bring it all together. That we're not looking for an action tonight. We're looking
No.
to have discussion surrounding this, so we
Right,
can do that.
and I would just note, just as a matter of discussion, that none of these changes have been approved by board members. They're just suggestions
Yeah.
at this point. So the first is on page 3, under the mission of the Board of Ed. And I know that I passed this particular document with these suggested changes at the retreat that we had. And so board members have had this document for some time. So hopefully you've had a chance to look through it, and we don't have to spend a lot of time reading everything verbatim. But I think what I would like from you is a sense of, is this something you want to consider? Do we want to nix it? What do we want to do? And if you're not ready to do that, then so note, make those notations.
Yeah, I would ask board members, I mean, we certainly have the these items listed.
Print it?
No, I read it, but I can't get it opened on my screen.
Here, you can have mine.
Thanks.
I can open mine.
Okay.
So we certainly have these items listed in red, and we'll have other discussion points. I mean, can we go through page by page and just call out what has been suggested? And then, if board members can take a look and just, we can have discussion or we can move on. I mean, it just really is just trying to get through the document.
There's a few things I'd like to say when I have a chance.
Sure. Do we want to go through page by page, and then you want to address them then, or you want to do it afterwards?
I'd like to do it beforehand, because there's so much here. I mean, we're like changing the whole board handbook. There's 7 new pages that are suggested here, and this is, beyond the pale. I mean, I don't know, I'd like to say a few things, but.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so I don't know, it was a couple months ago, and we were supposed to go over the board handbook, which I have the original one, and there are 6 items in here, small things that we had to do. And there's supposed to be a few simple changes. Well, several hours before the meeting, the board received a 7-page document. After reading one line of this board handbook redo, as I see it, it was directed at me, but I was not sure. Dr. Couch had the discussion tabled to the board retreat. Then I thought, did Dr. Couch and this particular member collaborate on these changes? I don't know the answer to that. Well, several weeks later, at the retreat, a MABE representative was there, plus 2 local citizens. It was verified that the tough questions were directed at me implicitly. In my opinion, this board member did not demonstrate their ethos in this document. I say this because at that meeting, the particular board member in question said that this document was directed at me. There was a lot of people there, and there was 2 witnesses. So it wasn't, I don't know if it was directed at a board member, I don't know if it was directed at Mrs. McGee, Mrs. Dorsey, or Mr. Getz. I don't know who it was directed at. So then, I believe that my integrity is being in question. The ideologies of this school system by this particular board member I just don't think they're correct. For example, I have a document to the entire board sent from this particular board member that the Southern Poverty Law Center has identified Moms for Liberty as an extremist group. We are supposed to be nonpartisan. However, in your document, it is pointed out that the school board race is nonpartisan, which is in this. In my opinion, this attack on Moms for Liberty is an ethics violation, and I have the whole thing here. It was addressed to all of us. So I will not have my constitutional rights and First Amendment rights removed from the citizens who voted me in. My voice will be heard. All this person wants to do is change this board handbook because of me. All I want to do is to see our students improve. My voice will not be silenced. So I have a list of the suggestions I made, but you want to go over those after we go over everything else, so that's fine. Furthermore, the board member in question who's not here, can't respond, is just referencing to counties or jurisdictions that you like. There is no basis for why these changes need to be made. You play out the changes, additions, modifications, and give no basis for the change. You are recommending changes, modifications, just because should not be accepted. There needs to be a good reason for the change with some belief that it will make the public schools better for the children. And that's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you. Do we want to start looking through the pages?
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to start, if I'm correct, on page 3, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So looking at that, when you take a look at the mission of the Board of Education in red, I'm not sure if everyone has the document open with the red. Thank you, Mr. Poor.
Page 3.
Page 3. Maybe. Maybe.
Right there.
Mr. Port, can you enlarge that just a little bit? Is that possible? Okay, great. Thank you. So this is here, this is added. Nothing in red in this whole document has been approved. But if you take a look at the mission of the Board of Education with this addition, board member thoughts, if you're taking a look at that. With the advice of the superintendent, Board of Ed establishes priorities together with specific objectives for the attainment of these priorities. Following the establishment of priorities, the superintendent and board members recommend agenda items or board meetings based on these priorities.
I don't think that has anything to do with the mission of the Board of Education. That's more of a procedure or and procedure's the closest thing I can think of. It doesn't have anything to do with a mission.
Right.
To me, it's how you would do something as opposed to what your goal is. I don't think it's appropriate for there. I don't think it's needed.
You're 100% right, because this is a procedural addition. This lady is trying to address the procedures of meetings and how members prepare for the meetings. This is not a mission statement, but solely about how the board will address the needs of the students, not the procedures of how the board operates. Missions are long-term goals for the public schools. Agenda items are not the goal. The goal is policies that improve the Kent County Public Schools.
Okay, are there any additional comments on that?
So do we want to, vote on these as we go through, or how do you want to take these? Because I mean, there's a lot of suggestions here.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we need to do is, as we go.
Why don't we do this? Why don't we ask if there's any sentiment to any agreement with majority of the board members to any of these recommendations as we go, just so that I can note them and then not bring them back again.
Yeah, I mean, we're not voting on this.
No, that's right.
You
But
just need directional sense.
right, I just need to know whether it gets nixed from the next version that I bring to you.
Mr. Constance, procedurally, thoughts on voting versus not voting?
Well, it's not an action item, so I would recommend that you not vote on this, but you can review it, get the board sentiment, and direct the administration to come back for another read, at which point it will be labeled an action item.
Right.
And you can vote on it, much like you do the first and second read for a policy.
Right, and it's just getting a sense of agreement. We're not voting on it.
Yeah.
It's just a sense of, is there any sentiment to leave that in there or take it out?
Yeah, I mean, we have two folks that are not on board with that. I'm personally not on board with keeping this in. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's right or wrong. I mean, Ms. Dorsey, I'm not sure where you are with this, but
I'm in agreement with what has been said, but I'm a new member myself, and I just want to say this. If I was to bring a suggestion to the board to be looked over, I wouldn't want anyone to say that I was trying to be in cahoots or do something, just because it was a suggestion. This is a mere suggestion. None of this is written in stone until we vote on it. So I just want to say that, because I don't want to feel like that's how I would be looked at, if I had a suggestion or a question or something.
yeah, and all the recommendations can go one way or the other. So it doesn't mean, I mean.
Or
it
maybe
can't-
I'm asking that question as well, because I don't want to feel like that. I need to, a little guidance on it, because I wouldn't want to be attacked because I decided to make a suggestion. Everybody's their own individual, so how they feel, they feel. They don't have to be right, in it. But I'm just saying, it's not always the way we think that, it's just their way of thinking.
Okay, Dr. Couch, we have a
Okay.
removal
Saying.
Yes.
suggested. Okay, page 4, there is nothing on page 4 that has been suggested. When we go to page 5, there is nothing there either that has been suggested. When you get to page 6, it lights up like a Christmas tree.
Yeah, I'm just going to say in general, I thought this was overkill. I mean, I really, think that for the most part, what's succinctly stated on all of these pages already says what it is. There's a lot of red, and some of this is parroting what's in other publications. Some is like 30 years old. So that's my general statement about it. Most of what was submitted, but specifically to the thing about board members' authority, I think that first paragraph basically says all that's needed to be said.
Right.
Again, just my opinion.
It already tells us that we have no authority alone.
What was that, Ms. Dorsey?
It's already stating that in the first paragraph, it states that we don't have any authority.
As individuals.
So
Yeah.
we don't need it up in the top.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, when I read this page 6 and I actually went into, page 7, I felt like this was a great board retreat discussion. But I don't know that it belongs in the document for the handbook.
And also, I think this is the kind of thing that new board members get in orientation.
Yeah, yeah.
Through May.
And some of it is just common sense.
Right.
Amen.
Well, one of the things that we talked about with the board handbook is it is a document that cannot encompass every single situation that one may encounter. So if we try to do that, then it's going to be probably 3 times as long. So, it's a matter of, do we feel that these additions are needed? Are they explicit? Are they implied? I think that's, and as I stated, I didn't want to form an opinion whether I agreed with it or didn't agree with it. I just simply brought forward what was suggested by a board member.
Yeah, I mean, again, I would just mention that what starts on the middle of page 6 and goes into the top of page 7, I think is quite frankly a board retreat conversation. This is something that all board members are trained on. We deal with it every day. I'm not sure that it needs to be in the document. That's my opinion. I'll yield to everyone else.
I feel the same way.
Okay. So let me just do it the reverse. Does anybody feel like that deserves a second look? Not, then I'll take it out.
I'm leaning take it out unless Ms. Dorsey or Mr. Rhodes wants to keep it in.
I don't want to keep it in.
No. Okay.
Okay.
Then the next portion is under board member qualifications.
Again,
It's-
I think basically what I just said, a board member qualification is kind of determined at the election booth, Somebody either elects you or they don't elect you. And if you've met the criteria, which means, you're 21, you live in Kent County and you're a voter, after that, I think everything else, this is basically not a board member qualification. It's basically saying you will do this and you won't do that. And that, to me, takes away the independence and autonomy of a board member. So, again, I don't think this is needed.
Anybody feel differently? I think that goes from 7 and it goes
To the
on
top
to
of
8.
9. Well, no, it stops at 8.
Yeah, I
School,
would
yeah.
say page 7 and 8. So I'll take that out. Okay, page 9 is school visitations. And essentially, that is really, it is already expressed in our board policy. So we don't have all of our board policies in the board handbook. So,
I do think one thing about the school visitations is that if they're programmed or we have to get, a day notice or something, that you have a chance to change things around. Like when, they want to, someone, OSHA wants to visit a business, they're going to show up and they're going to find out what's going on. And I think, in my own personal opinion, I caught a lot of flack for it, but I went into middle school earlier this year, and I met with the SRO officer. I walked in, and I saw what was going on. If I'd gotten an appointment, it might have never happened. And I just think, Dr. Couch, it says in the citizens of Kent County vote for the board members, and the board members tell the superintendent what to do. And I just think that we have a little more authority, and I think we should be able to visit these schools. Like, if I want to go into the high school, I generally go in, but now I go in and I'll go to the front desk, present my badge. If I can't go in and they're busy, then I'll leave. But I think we should be able to go in. We are the board. We are in charge of making our school system run correctly. And I know we're governance, but how are we going to govern if we don't really know what's going on? And I understand what your opinion is, Dr. Couch. You want it to be total control and whatever, but I think we should have a little more authority, in my opinion. I think we should have a little more authority to go in, not saying that we're going to be running to all these schools, but we should go and check in on them once in a while. There's nothing wrong with it. If there isn't, leave. That's my opinion. And I know I don't have the visitation policy here, but I do remember last year when you guys went over the visitation, Nivek, who was sitting right in this seat, said this is really vague. I remember him saying that, and I wasn't even on the school board yet.
Well,
But it is vague.
if I'm understanding you correctly, Dr. Couch, since this is all in red, there isn't anything in the handbook about school visitations, correct?
correct.
Okay, so that might be the first thing. Do we need to create something? The second thing is maybe I'm splitting hairs with Mr. Rhodes, but I don't think as a board, our job is to run the schools. Our job is to hire the people to run the schools. That's the way I look at it. But again, just my opinion. But the first thing is maybe maybe this is something Mr. Rhodes and I might agree on, that we need to maybe we need to add to the handbook school visitation, or a discussion about whether you think the school visitation, that's the regular policy. Do you think, just thinking out loud, do board members have special exception to the school visitation policy? It might be something worth a discussion. Don't know.
I
It is.
agree.
So are we revisiting this in red, or Dr. Couch, this is fairly similar to the policy, correct? Or is there some?
I don't have the policy right in front of me,
Okay.
so I don't know per se where she took this.
Okay.
If it's an excerpt from the policy itself, or if this is something, so I'd have to go back and compare it to the policy itself.
Yeah, I think the consensus here is to keep a portion or keep this in here.
Okay.
Yeah, I think
And
it
to
would be
revisit that?
important to have
Yeah.
something in the board handbook about the school visitation policy as it applies to board members.
Okay,
Yep,
So that could be something we can work on.
right.
great, okay. Okay, at the bottom of page 9, as Mr. Poor drives down to the bottom there, regarding student members are expected to ask questions, participate in discussions, expressing own views and views of guest students. I feel like that is laid into that second paragraph, non-voting member but has right to express an opinion and cast an advisory vote. I know it doesn't dive directly into expressing the views or own views or identifying which view or views are being expressed. There's definitely mention of the advisory vote, which I think that was what was codified in law. this last session. So I'm not sure if paragraph 2 in that portion needs to be kind of fleshed out with some verbiage added in there.
Maddie,
I mean-
what do you think as a board, as the student member of the board?
I think the second paragraph is fine. I mean, they kind of look the exact same to me. But if you want to flesh it in and say, ask questions and participate in discussions, I think that a couple more words wouldn't hurt. I think that when I attended the orientation for student member of the board and when I did the retreat, I think this is kind of what I was taught, so.
Right, it says, has the right to, the second paragraph says, has the right to express an opinion and cast an advisory vote. So to me, that says that the student board member is going to ask questions and participate in the discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah, as long as the advisory vote is in there, really, is what I'm pretty worried about. Other than that, I think it's fine.
Right, and that's what we added, that second paragraph is what we added after we
New
codified
legislation.
the student
Yeah.
board member.
Yeah.
So what I'm hearing is page 9 at the bottom is out.
Yeah.
Okay,
Do we want anything in there regarding advisory vote, though?
it is in there.
Is it in there?
Second paragraph.
Got it, there it is. Thank you. Okay, page 10.
Again, just
Yeah.
parroting what I've been saying all along, I don't think this is needed for a couple of reasons. First of all, we're taking it from another board, Board of school district. It's 20 plus years old. I can't believe they haven't updated it since then. And I don't think we should be dictating to each other how we behave. I mean, I hope that we're all civil and, are on our best behavior, so to speak, but I think this is not necessary. I mean, if somebody wants to act up, they're going to act up, whether it's written down or not, So, again, I'm going to say, I don't see that this is needed. Don't let me take over. I
No,
wanna hear
you're
somebody else
you're
say
not
stuff.
looking through and
I agree.
are there any additional comments regarding this section? Does anyone have a burning desire to keep it in? Okay, I think that's a nosedive there. Okay, the remainder of 11 had no changes in red. Page 12 was the same, officers, board organizational meeting of the Board of Education, regular meetings. Page 13, also, when you take a look at board agenda, minutes, et cetera, there's no changes
I
there.
think the next one is page 15.
Yeah, so you keep going to 15.
And this is one that I proposed, and it's just taken out that we don't have a scheduled hearing for the capital budget and CIP. We bring it forward to the board for approval and we have discussion, but we don't have a hearing. So that's just a matter of codifying what we do.
Okay. Very good. Scrolling on to page 17.
Just the Board of Education correspondence and email communications, the first thing says the superintendent says a Friday communication at the end of each week, which we know that's
Yeah,
not the case.
that's not the case.
Yeah. but Just
So
thinking,
we should probably take that out.
yeah.
I mean, I send communications when it's
When it's-
important.
yeah, right,
But
yeah.
it doesn't necessarily have to be every Friday.
Gotcha.
So we'll take that, page 17, first
Part
sentence.
number 1.
Yes.
Just the first thing that says the superintendent
number
says
1.
a Friday.
Just the
first sentence.
the first, yeah.
And then we roll into adding the verbiage in email communications, and you look down at the bottom of 17, it goes into the top and mid portion of 18, board email communications. Board business.
Yeah, I think that for the most part, I think back to our meeting in January, which was Mr. Rhodes and Ms. Dorsey's first meeting, and it was a primer for me coming back on. Mr. Costas spent a great deal of time explaining to board members how to handle emails and the Open Meetings Act and stuff like that. I don't know that we need to be hit over the head with it again.
Mr. Constance, do you think that we should have something in there about email communication, maybe shorten it and just do a brief overview, or do you see it as overkill?
It could probably be tightened up.
Yeah, there's one sentence in there that says, should be avoided. It's talking about, like, if we sent out we started talking board business in an email, I think the word should be a little stronger. It shouldn't be should, it should be must be, because otherwise we're violating the Open Meetings Act. And I actually, maybe I'll dial it back a little bit. There were some important points there. The fact that all emails are subject to
open meetings.
And
Not necessarily true. It's a little bit more nuanced.
Yes.
well, but also, but I don't know if it's all, but I know emails, I think I know this, fall under the thing if somebody makes a FOIA request.
Rolling quorum.
Yeah, those kinds of things. So maybe we could ask Mr. Costas to help us take 2 pages, melt them down to a paragraph or 2.
I would just make add to the list. I could see us just adding to the list that already exists and make a bullet about, number 6 about PIA, number 7 about OMA. And distill what's in this page.
17 and 18.
Yeah, into a couple bullets.
So I made a notation that we'll take this, add number 6, and then just condense it. So that takes care of 17 and 18.
The bottom of 18 has the SMOB email correspondence. Is there anything here that we want to add?
I really think that it's covered under the fact that the SMOB is not privy to anything that we would be discussing in closed session, so it makes sense they shouldn't be getting an email that has that kind of information in it.
Okay. Top of 19, when you take a look at requests by individual board members, thoughts?
Well,
we have it codified in the document already how to make requests, correct? Or is that's for meeting agenda items, not necessarily requests?
no, it's not. I don't think there's anything in this document that specifically addresses individual requests by board members.
I would think that if a board member, because the agenda comes out, Ms. Manley, is it like on a Thursday? Okay, so that's 5 days before a board meeting. If you, as a board, I'll speak about myself, if I'm looking at the agenda and I don't understand or what we're going to talk about, I'm going to pick up the phone and talk to Dr. Couch. I don't think it has to be written down that that's what I would do.
Yeah.
I think that's what anybody would do if they have a question about something. Or I might pick up the phone and talk to Mr. Getz, or I might pick up the phone and say to Mr. Rhodes, hey, what do you think about this? What do you, da-da-da-da-da. I don't know that I feel like in general, so many of these things are prescribing our behavior, which we are grown-ups. We don't have to be told how to act.
Yeah.
And I don't say that to be disrespectful to the author. I'm just saying, much of this is no-brainer stuff.
So, am I hearing
Any-
that's out?
I say, but again,
Yeah, I mean, I would lean on pulling that whole section on top of 19. I'm not sure
Okay.
how the other board members feel.
no, I support that.
Mr. Rhodes?
I'm fine with that, too.
Okay.
Okay,
Ms. Dorsey, you okay with that too?
Yeah.
that was a yes.
Okay.
Okay, rolling through 20, 21, there's nothing that has changed there. 22 is attachment A, 23 is attachment B. You take a look at 24, excuse me. 25 is listed here, no changes. 26, no changes. And then when you roll into 27, that's the application for the Citizens Advisory Committee.
Right.
And I think as you go through attachment C, D,
None of those changed.
nothing has changed.
Okay.
The last
That's it.
17, 18 pages have stayed static.
Here's this.
Okay, so we've gone through that document. Mr. Rhodes, did you want to go through?
Yeah, quickly. We've already been over these at the
Yes.
retreat, but I just want to read them quickly again.
Hold on one second.
Excuse me?
I just want to make sure everyone's. I want to make sure everyone's.
Oh, okay.
Okay, go right ahead.
Okay. First, I added these to this other document that's submitted. Make it known that the superintendent works for the board as shown in the organizational chart. I think we're going to go over that when we do the handbook. Board members should be able to visit any school at any time, checks and balances, and transparency. The state superintendent, Mohammed Chaudhry, who's retired, said we should be hanging out in the school and helping students and staff and supporting them. Number 3, during any school construction project, a board member will be given access to the construction project manager at any time, again, checks and balances. Number 4, board members will be offered the opportunity to walk through the school when the state superintendent visits. Now, I know, Dr. Couch, you said when he came here, he didn't want us, but I think that would be nice to have in there, that they know we should be able to spend some time with the state superintendent. I think that's important. Our superintendent should make the decision by October before their term ends to notify the board if they will not seek another term. Now, I know you said it's in the MABE rules that it can't happen until January.
It's in Comar.
Or Comar. Well, I don't particularly agree with Comar, but it gives us 3 months to pick a new superintendent. I don't think that's much time, in my opinion. The suggestions at the previous meeting will be discussed line by line. We've already done that. We need to review our entire handbook and compare to other counties. We've already done that. And then I said the state board will not take over our local board. We've already discussed that. And the MCAP scores should be published locally in the Kent County News no more than 2 weeks after they are posted. We need transparency. The other 3 that I added, during the search for a new superintendent, we should make specific effort to recruit a Maryland native, preferably from the Eastern Shore, if they meet the criteria. In the future, when recruiting human resources personnel, we should ensure that they hold a relevant degree or have overwhelming relevant professional experience. I know that Mrs. Stewart, I spoke to her, she has all kinds of degrees in finance, and you said you were working on it. Do you have your degree in human resources yet? You were working on that. Number 3, we need to review county handbooks other than Howard County. Some examples are well, I already have all those, but we've already gone through our handbooks, so that's irrelevant.
So I would ask.
Yeah, so I would ask you, are there any of these suggestions? There are 12 suggestions, I think you mentioned like 4 or 5 that we've already gone through.
Yes.
Okay. Is there anything that we've not gone through in these suggestions that anyone would like to see statements written around or added to for another look?
Well, I think we agreed, didn't take any action, but agreed that number 2, about visits, that maybe we should
Work on that.
Work on visitation policy as it applies to school board members, which will be different, maybe different than how it applies to the average citizen that wants to come into a school. Did we say
Yes.
we'd like that?
I put that in there.
Okay.
Yeah, and Dr. Couch, if I can just talk about the decision by October. So a superintendent needs to have their decision communicated to the board by February 1st, correct?
Correct,
And we have until June 30th to fill the position,
correct.
5 months. Okay, so there is additional time there, it's not 3, and there is some time.
Correct.
Okay.
Do we have a procedure set up to look for a new superintendent?
So typically, boards have 2 choices. They could either go through MABE, which they have a structured process to go through superintendent searches, or they can hire outside, a different, not MABE. So it depends on, MABE will do typically 3 to 4 a year, if that's the count. That's typically their ceiling. And they bring in people that have done it for years. Or we can secure someone from the outside, so.
Or there is a third alternative, or there used to be, because one of the superintendents, I wasn't on the board, the board decided to conduct its own search, and,
Hire an interim.
yeah, and, well, no. That's how Dr. Ward ended up here. The board, and unfortunately, the superintendent, the person who was the superintendent at the time also had a hand in the hiring, and I'm looking at Gina because she knows it didn't work out well. So, so there is that. I think that's a third option. A board could decide to do it on its own, but I know I don't have the skills
I think
to do it.
I think that's what you were saying. You could either go through MABE or conduct your own search.
Oh, or contract with another search committee.
Yeah. Or firm.
Yeah, somebody else that does that kind of
Now, you
stuff.
can change your mind if you want, correct?
I changed my mind, what? What do you mean?
To continue as a superintendent, or you made your decision, you said you can do it in February, but you could change your mind if you want in February and say, no, I want to stay on, correct?
I guess I could.
We as a board could either accept that or not.
I understand.
Yeah, isn't it-
I'm just trying to figure this out.
Isn't it that whatever the deadline is, the superintendent has
To notify.
At that deadline, has to notify the board if he or she would like to stay or they're going to retire. And then the board has to decide, let's say the superintendent decides they'd like a new contract. The board has to decide whether they want to offer that superintendent a
Correct.
new contract or go out and find a new person.
Correct.
That's
So, correct, okay.
Are we allowed to go to MABE and ask them, could you help us just look and see what might be available in 3 months? Should our superintendent, so we're a little ahead of the curve?
We have 5.
I'm just saying that, 5 months, what is it, February 1st you have to?
Yeah, by February 1st.
In March, April, May, June, that's 4 months or, I don't know.
5 months. Yeah, at the end of the day, they typically, just from what I've seen from other counties, they're typically not going to throw out candidates, right? They don't know what the picture looks like. And so, I just heard recently there was a county that someone just announced they were not renewing or they were leaving, right? So once that happens, then the board goes into the process of trying to figure out, as Trish mentioned, what are the next steps? And then it moves pretty, not quickly, but you reach out to whether you're independent contractor or to MABE, and then the process moves forward. And it's very prescribed,
Right.
Okay.
with everything.
I'd like to learn more about
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Okay, sure.
And it's the same process that we went through with the executive director at MABE. It's the same process that I was involved with the state superintendent. It's the same process all the way through.
Okay.
And they pull from all across the country as well as local, and it all depends on who applies.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, are there any other items on
On
here?
this list.
On this list that we want to pull forward to look at verbiage to add to the policy? There are 2 pages. The first
Add
page
to the
is
handbook.
Handbook, I'm sorry. First page is 9, the second page is 3.
We said number 2, we would definitely integrate into the school visitations. So is there anything else?
There are a handful of these that we've addressed
Yep.
that are already in process and already being done.
You're correct.
Okay, I'm not hearing any.
Have we gone to the second page yet, or are we just
Yeah.
going to go to the first?
Would
Yeah, we,
any of the
Yeah,
pages.
I asked for
Okay,
any.
I firmly believe that the people that work here should have degrees on what they do. The human resources and the finance people and the lawyer, obviously, should have degrees in what they do. We need to run this not like it's just come on in and learn your job on the go. I want people to know what's going on. And that's why I think that our human resources, which is probably one of the most important jobs in the school system, should have a degree. And you told me at a meeting, I think you said you're working on it. So are you getting any closer?
Is this an opportunity here for open dialogue?
No, we can address that. Okay, any other additions? Dr. Couch, do you have what you need to come back?
What I would note is when jobs are posted, those jobs are provided to the school board for review before they're posted, and that would be the time if you want specific qualifications to be added to a job description at that point in time, you could bring that forward. I don't know that it necessarily belongs in a handbook.
I'll just add that individual qualifications and personnel items should be discussed in closed session, as they typically are.
Yep.
Okay. Great, thank you. Okay, I think we have some marching orders there, Dr. Couch. We can go ahead and take care of that. Okay, moving on to public participation. Ms. Gale, do we have public participation? Okay, prior to having our participation, just want to review some rules for public participation. Speakers should limit their comments to 3 minutes. Comments about the actions or statements of individual staff members are not appropriate for public comments and should be referred to the superintendent of schools or processed through available channels. If submitting written testimony, speakers are requested to provide a copy to the president. Please remember that this is an opportunity for the community to address their comments to the board. It's not an opportunity for dialogue. If you have questions that need an answer, please contact the superintendent or write a letter to the Board of Education and a response will be sent back to you. 3 minutes. At 30 seconds, I will let you know that you have 30 seconds left, and at 3 minutes exactly, the timer will go off, and away we go. Okay? First person up, Ms. Walters.
Good evening. It's been over a year since I've stood at this podium and addressed you, which I'm sure you've been happy about. But you see, my concerns about education were brought to light in 2016 when we moved to Kent County from Virginia. Post-2020, many other parents have developed similar concerns and then some. Just popping onto social media or the news, you can hear those concerns. So I decided to give it a rest locally, and I went above. But with that said, it does not excuse the lack of responsibility, and that responsibility falls on all of you. With one of the smallest school districts in the state, you all should be ashamed of our poor results, ashamed that you have fallen to the political jargon of the teachers' union. You are failing our children, our communities, and the taxpayers that fund this system. Moreover, you can write your wishes on a piece of paper. That does not make them come true. Just look at all of these posters around the room. There's lots of falsehoods on them. Read them, make them a reality, and make them truthful. You owe it to us and to our children. Furthermore, when it comes to a handbook, why are we comparing, which, thank God you've mixed it, to the largest county, Montgomery County? Why would we even compare to them? We weren't comparing test scores, as you stated, Dr. Couch. Why would we compare a handbook? And why are board members writing their own policies? Companies do not allow employees to dictate their policies. These teachers don't write their own policies. Why should you write your own? If you can't even hold a superintendent accountable, how do we trust you to hold yourselves accountable? I would recommend, if you're going to do updates to a handbook, that you form a committee full of constituents that voted you into office that are going to hold you accountable. I think you could do better. And while you're at it, and the lawyer is here, not only did you ban my husband from volunteer coaching, on a witch hunt full of falsehoods, you have removed me from any communication in regards to my son at the high school. You see, he's still there, but I do not get a voicemail on Sunday evenings, and I do not get any email communications. I would say that that might be another form of retaliation. What do you think?
Thank you, Ms. Walters. Ms. Gale, do we have any other additional conversations? Okay. All right, we'll move on to the notification of our next meeting. The next meeting of the Board of Education of Kent County will be held on Monday, December 11th, 2023, beginning at 5:30 p.m. with the open session. Open session will be immediately followed by the board members going into closed session. The open session will resume at 6:30 p.m. The meeting will be located at the administrative building in the boardroom, this room, located at 5608 Boundary Avenue, Rock Hall, Maryland, 21661. The last item on the agenda, the administration is recommending approval to adjourn the meeting. Do we have a motion to do so?
I make that motion.
Ms. McGee has the motion. Do we have a second?
I second.
Second by Ms. Dorsey. Any further comments or questions? Hearing none, we'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Ms. Messick?
Aye.
The ayes have it. This meeting is adjourned. The time is 7:01. Thank you, everyone.